The bit I'm going to read is near the beginning, and it describes how the hero, Trotter, is kind of brought in contact with his country and comes to love his country, which is Austria-Hungary. Early one morning, it was in April of 1914, and I was still groggy, having gone to bed only 1 or 2 hours before. A visitor was announced, a cousin of mine by the name of Trotter. In my dressing gown and slippers, I padded out to the antechamber. The windows were open wide. The morning blackbirds in our garden were warbling away. The early sun merrily poured into the room. Our maid, whom I had never seen so early in the day before, looked unfamiliar to me in her blue apron. I only knew her in her formal evening incarnation, assembled from blonde, black and white, something like a flag. It was the first time I had seen her in her blue gear, which resembled the sort of thing that engineers and gasmen wear, wielding a purple feather duster. The sight of her alone would have been enough to change my ideas about life. For the first time in years, I beheld the morning in my house, and I saw that it was beautiful. I liked the maid. I liked the open windows. I liked the sun. I liked the singing of the blackbirds. It was as golden as the morning sun. Even the girl in her blue outfit was somehow as golden as the sun. There was so much gold about that at first I failed to make out the visitor who was waiting for me. I only noticed him a couple of seconds, or perhaps minutes, later. Lean, swarthy and silent, he was sitting in the only chair our anteroom had to offer, and he didn't budge when I entered. Even with his black hair and moustache and his brown skin, he too, amidst the matutinal gold of the anteroom, was like a piece of the sun, albeit some distant southern sun. He reminded me spontaneously of my late father. He too had been dark and lean, bony and brown, swarthy and a real child of the sun, not like us, its fair-haired stepchildren. I speak Slovene, my father had taught me. I greeted my Trotter cousin in his native tongue. It seemed not to surprise him. What else was I going to do? He didn't get up, he remained seated. He held out his hand to me. He smiled. His big, strong teeth gleamed under his blue-black moustache. He said "du" to me right away. I felt, he's not a cousin, he's my brother. He had my address from the lawyer. Your father, he began, left me 2,000 gulden in his will, and I have come to collect them. I want to thank you. Tomorrow I will go home. I have a sister who will be able to get married now. With a dowry of 500 gulden, she will get the richest farmer in Sipolia. What about the rest of the money? That's for me, he said serenely. He smiled, and it seemed to me the sun was pouring into our anteroom even more brightly. What will you do with the money? I will invest it in my business, he replied. And as though the moment to introduce himself had finally come, he got up from his chair. There was a confident swagger as he stood there, and a touching formality with which he introduced himself. Joseph Branko is the name, he said. Only then did I remember I was standing in front of my visitor in dressing gown and slippers. I asked him to wait and went back in my room to dress. It was no later than 7 o'clock when we strolled into the Café Margot. The first of the baker's delivery boys were just arriving, snow-white and smelling of crisp rolls and poppy seed biscuits and salt sticks. The day's first freshly roasted coffee, virginal and spicy, smelt like a morning within a morning. My cousin Joseph Branko was sitting beside me, swarthy and southern, merry, healthy and alert. I felt ashamed of my haggardness and my almost colourless pallor. I was a little uncomfortable as well. What was I going to talk to him about? It made me a little more uncomfortable when he said, I don't drink coffee in the morning. I want soup. Of course, in Sipolia, the peasants started the day with potato soup. So I ordered potato soup for him. It was a long time coming, and in the meantime I was bashfully dipping my almond croissant in my coffee. Finally, it did come, a steaming bowlful. My cousin Joseph Branko disregarded his spoon. He raised the steaming bowl to his mouth in his black-haired brown hands. While he drank his soup, he seemed to have forgotten about me. Completely concentrating on his steaming bowl supported on the tips of his strong, slim fingers. He looked like a person in whom appetite is a noble thing, and who disdained a spoon because it is nobler to drink straight from the bowl. Yes, while I watched him drinking his soup, I was almost perplexed by the fact that people had bothered to invent something as ridiculous as spoons. My cousin set down his bowl, and I could see that it was smooth and empty and clean, as if it had just been wiped and washed. "This afternoon," he said, "I will collect the money." "What sort of business was it?" I asked him, that he was planning to invest in. "Oh," he said, "a very small business, but something that will keep a man fed through the winter." And so I learned that in spring, summer, and autumn, my cousin Joseph Branco was a farmer tending his fields, but in winter he was a chestnut roaster. He had a sheepskin, a mule, a small cart, a roasting pan, and 5 sacks of chestnuts. Thus equipped, he set off every year at the beginning of November through some of the monarchy's crown lands. If he happened to like it in one particular place, he would spend the whole winter there until the storks came. Then he would tie the empty sacks around the mule and go to the nearest railway station. He put the mule in a cattle car, boarded the train, went home, and became a farmer again. I asked him how it was possible to expand such a small business, and he indicated there were various possibilities. For instance, one might offer a sideline of baked apples and baked potatoes in addition to the chestnuts. Also, his mule was old and feeble, and it was almost time to buy a new one. He had a couple of 100 crowns already saved up. He wore a shimmering satin jacket, a flowery velvet waistcoat with coloured glass buttons, and a heavy braided gold watch chain looped around his neck. And I, who had been raised by my father to love the Slavs of our empire, and who was therefore apt to take any sort of folkloric detail for a totem, straightway fell for the chain. I wanted to have it. I asked my cousin how much it cost. "I don't know," he said. "I got it from my father, and he got it from his father. It's not the sort of thing you can buy. But seeing as you're my cousin, I'll sell it to you." "How much is it then?" I asked. And there I was, mindful of everything my father had inculcated into me, thinking to myself that a Slovene farmer is far too noble to think of money and prices. My cousin Joseph Branco thought for a long time, and finally he said, 23 crowns. I didn't ask how he arrived at this particular figure. I gave him 25. He counted them out, made no move to give me 2 crowns change, pulled out a great red and blue checked handkerchief, and wrapped the money in that. Only then, after twice knotting the handkerchief, did he take off the chain, pull the watch out of his waistcoat pocket, and lay watch and chain on the table. It was an old-fashioned, heavy silver watch, with a little key to wind it. My cousin seemed a little reluctant to detach it from the chain, looked at it tenderly, almost devoutly, for a long time, and finally said, "Well, seeing as you're my cousin, if you give me another 3 crowns, you can have the watch as well." I gave him a whole 5-crown piece. He didn't give me any change this time either. Once again he produced his handkerchief, unpicked the double knot, put the new coin in with the other money, stuffed the handkerchief back in his pocket, and looked at me with his big brown eyes. "I like your waistcoat too," I said, after an interval of a few seconds. "I'll buy that off you as well." "Because you're my cousin," he replied. "I'll sell you my waistcoat as well." And not hesitating for a moment, he pulled off his jacket, took off his waistcoat, and passed it across the table to me. "It's good material," said Joseph Branco, "and the buttons are pretty. Because it's you, I'll only ask 2.50. I gave him 3 crowns, and in his eyes I could clearly see the disappointment that it wasn't 5 again. He seemed disgruntled, stopped smiling, but in the end he stowed the money away just as carefully and elaborately as he had done with the rest. So now I had, as I saw it, the most important attributes of a proper Slovene: an old watch chain, a brightly coloured waistcoat, and a heavy lump of a watch, stopped, with a key to wind it. I didn't hesitate. I put on all 3 items on the spot, paid, and ordered up a fiacre. I accompanied my cousin to his hotel. He was staying at the Green Huntsman. I asked him to wait for me tonight so that I could collect him. I wanted to introduce him to my friends.